Check 1, 2. Seeking you will find all that your heart desires. From the beginning of time, never wanting to know all of the truth about it. It was lacking the last time we met. Yeah, oh, the last time we met. I don't know where you've gone to now. Make the decisions next time I see your face. I want you there. I want you there. I want you there with me. From the night time creeping into our lives, I'm the shoulder to cry on. I want you there with me. Hi, I'm August Siri. Welcome to another original hard rock set. Although this is not a regular set, I'm going to just do a creation cave thing today. So these are basically song skeletons that are like almost songs, and bringing you all along for my home studio journey for today. Enough academics. I've pounded myself I don't know how many hours this week at, at various times with my suite that I'm writing on for my solo bass. And also, usually, I mean, academics are part of my musical life anyways. But sometimes I need to take a break from all that and just write and just work on what I truly love is my original hard rock music, you know. So this is Creation Cave 2026 series. So this is really no format, no regular set. I might do partial songs. I might do entire songs. Who knows what's going to happen? But I'm going to do a cam check just to make sure I'm centered good here. And then we'll mosey on into some studio fun. How about that? Just take a look here what we have for. Looks pretty good. Looks like I'm, well, sort of. I'm kind of off to the side, aren't I? Oh, God. So I'll just move my mic around. So I'm kind of creeping off to the side there on my alignment. See, I don't have a cameraman, folks, so, you know. Put this more, like, in front here. That way I'm not, like, leaning to one side of the screen. And my cables are getting tangled up here, so there we go. Get this like untangled. There we go. So that's really what it's about, folks. With Creation Cave is really just studio fun. It's showing you some of the creative process that I do here at Darkanica Studios, Northern Vermont, USA, and it's really just, you know, it's about, you know, it's not just, it's focusing on harmony, focusing on, you know, the musicality of the music, of course, but it's also about, you know, not, I don't want to say not thinking, but it's like Michael Jackson used to say, if you're thinking, you're not feeling. There is some truth to that, but by not thinking, you've already thought about it before with your academics, right? So you should have. So, anyways, that was just a kind of a song skeleton I'm starting to add lyrics into, so that's one step closer to actually being a real song. So it's obviously in G major. This, you know, diatonic, nothing fancy, and that's how I start populating songs with parts, and then key changes. You know, as I'll start building different parts in there. Now, this, I think the chromatic, I'm doing, you know, half step above semitone is octave, so I'm doing these octaves. That didn't really work. Not sure if that would work because the song is so melodic, and then once you put a chromatic progression in there, it does give a definite juxtaposition to the rest of the vibe of the song. So I don't know if I would keep that in there. That's why I was kind of experimenting with that a little bit in the middle section there. So I'm not sure what, and I'm still searching for what key I would do this. I would do the guitar solo for that piece. I don't even have a name for the piece, really. I was thinking, you know, I Want You There or something like that. It's more of a pop-based piece, you know. I do some pop rock still, not just hard rock and metal. Like some of my earlier work, so you'll see like Fading. If you look at Fading from my SoundCloud, that's definitely pop rock. In All My Best Wishes, that's pop rock. 7 Days, that's pop rock. So, ironically, I don't say ironically, but in the same key, I started my Mystic Forest suite. That's a solo-based suite project, a suite. It should be sweet when I'm done with it, but suite project with 3 movements, which I've been talking about on posts and etc. And that's over here, right behind me, over here on my music stand. And I've already invested countless hours. And why does it take longer? Because I'm not just downloading something off the internet and then playing it. I can take somebody else, another artist's work, like, maybe some classic stuff from, whatever, Birdland, or something from Spiral Gyra, or whatever jazz piece I want, and transcribe them, basically download, print, and then perform it. That's great too. I mean, there's that side of what I can do in my toolbox, but as you all know, I'm a songwriter creator, not just in writing songs with vocal and guitar, but also with creating bass parts, solo bass pieces of music intended just for solo bass. Some of it's hard rock and metal, some of it's jazz, contemporary jazz, jazz rock fusion, and that sort of thing. A little bit of funk rock. I've mixed a few different genres in there, but for the most part, my solo bass work is hard rock and metal, and some form of jazz or jazz rock fusion genres. With my bass work, guitar is mostly hard rock and metal, pop rock, that kind of thing. More just rock and roll. My guitar stuff. It's only so much time of the day, folks. And I like to just have fun with my Les Paul and not. I don't get as in depth with my studies with my guitar work on the theory end as I do with my bass work. That's really where I've been at with that for a long time, because I just keep this fun. I don't want to turn this into as much work as my bass work is. I mean, there's only, like I said, when I do this 24 hours a day, I mean, no, only so much time in a day, like I always say, and that is the truth of it, So I'm going to try some more ideas with that first song, Skeleton. A guitar solo should be I think I like to change key, get away from the tonic. I don't know if I'm going to use, submedia, or maybe whole tone into supertonic. I don't know. I could do something in A minor. So I'm still in that stage. You see, I'm kind of showing the inner workings of what I do pretty much all the time when I'm writing songs. Only I don't always film when I'm writing songs. I just show you the final product. So I could do something in A minor. Something like that. And you've got to just experiment with stuff, and everything isn't going to sound perfect right when you play it, because you're creating stuff, I mean, like that chromatic part sounded a little awkward to me, and and that's why I think I would, because it's diatonic, G major for tonic key, for this song, Skeleton, that will become a real song. So in that framework, that would be G major. Sorry, that would be G minor. how that works. Of course, you want to stick to the intended mode, of the piece. But again, remember when I've talked about workshops, I use mode switching. So what I may do, because the piece is in G major, the tonic key of this particular example, well, it's not really example, this will become a real song. But in this song skeleton, I would probably do a solo in A minor. So after all of this with verses and choruses, in the main framework, which is all diatonic, no flats or anything, or sharps. So I would want to juxtapose it with something a little different and not just follow that same pattern or mode through the entire piece. That just makes for a boring 3-chord radio rock song, which I have a few of those. When I go from rock and roll to jazz, it's kind of like going from basic math to algebra. So when I'm in my prog rock mode and jazz mode, I bring some of that element and flavor back to my rock music. When I float off on the different genres and write and practice and study, when I come back to this, it's like, wait a minute, I got to put some more parts in there, I don't want to make it too off center, because then it's no longer a pop rock piece. Then it becomes prog rock or something different, So you want to maintain, that's that continuity thing. And that's something that as a writer, you need to focus on keeping consistency, but at the same time, don't be afraid to break barriers, go past boundaries. So now I'll try some progressions in A minor. Just, again, this is not pre-planned. I don't expect everything to be perfect. This isn't a performance. I'm just having some fun, folks. So chill on the critics, Try some different riffs. That would be the note. Remember, A minor. And there's some mode switching there. The second time. Now the other trick is to make it fit the song. So yeah, you can come up with all these different riffs and overplay and do whatever, but if it doesn't fit the song, it's just not going to sound right. Even non-musicians who listen to the piece, they'll be like, this doesn't really sound good, or it doesn't sound right. They might not necessarily understand why, but that's where you need to appeal to a wide scope audience, not just musicians, not just non-musicians. You need to present yourself to anybody, basically, and but for me as a songwriter, I try to sculpt parts that fit the vibe of the song. Sometimes if I'm writing in prog rock mode, that kind of gets thrown out the window a bit, because I'm usually writing a lot more parts and they don't all necessarily vibe together with the same feel, because I'm actually going into different genres of music right in the context of the song. Prog rock's a little different, but for standard rock and roll, pop rock stuff, I'm going to try to stick to that without it being too square. At the same time, throw some stuff in there and experiment with some different parts. That's one thing as a songwriter that you need to do. Absolutely. That's how you carve the parts out, That's what we go back into, but you can also do a breakdown in there. You can change it up where it's just vocals and guitar, like really decrescendo on the dynamics, definitely forte piano, something like that, or piano. So this is what I do is I'll rotate back to the main sections of the song and then go back to because it gives me a juxtaposition mental framework for setting up the vibe of the song. If that makes sense to you, it does to me. So I know that this is just a sample of what I might do, is nothing is cemented at this point. I know I'm doing something in A minor. I know I'm probably going to be working off the minor third, as I continue up into the progressions in the second position or whatever. So in second position. Minor triad, because I want to stick with the A minor mode solo, just in the experimenting part of it. I can change it to a different key. I can change it and try some different. I can put more chord changes in there than just soloing over A minor. Obviously, I can. It has to start somewhere. When you plant the seed, it doesn't just grow immediately. It takes, you got to work these different part ideas in there. Try some positional and closed position and open position playing. So I can try some open position playing. Now you notice how I went into the next position. I actually went into B minor pentatonic only for a few notes, and then dropped. And I caught the top position of the A minor pentatonic scale when I was declining. If anybody who cares or even noticed that. that's part of the experimenting, is you need to look at everything. Doesn't have to just stay in that single mode, framework. You need to, and if it doesn't sound good, then you try something else. I mean, that's what this is about, is you're just looking to find those areas that maybe aren't so standard and common. Sometimes you want to be that because it supports vocals, but then you can change different parts of the song to not be that, so that it's something a little different. It doesn't sound like a million other 3-chord radio songs out there. This would be a song I would write for rock radio. If it actually becomes a song, it's a song skeleton. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I have so many other things going on musically in this studio and out on stage with other performers and working on my bass chops and theory, that I'm just trying to keep it contained to what I know I can do, experiment and push the envelope so that I can put the best performance possible into my home studio recordings and, performances via Facebook Live out to my YouTube channel, Hard Rock Vermont. And so I can just do the best I can do. All you can do is, I said this before to the critics, is all you can do is be the best you can be. And don't worry about the small percentage of, the social media thing, like I've talked about before. I've had some mouthy people I had to get rid of because of politics, because of, bringing awkward stuff in, and that's why I got rid of my other pages as well. And I've talked about this stuff before, so I don't need to go into all the disclaimer on this video, because this is supposed to be about fun, not navigating social media, walking on eggshells, or I don't care, But I do appreciate everyone who follows my music, so I do take this very seriously. So, when I'm building my music and parts and my playing and all that, of course, everyone knows I've been a professional musician since I was a teenager. That means out in front of people for money, on bass, guitar, and vocals. Yes, guitar is another talent of mine that I enjoy, just kind of keeping it in the fun mode, but yet taking it seriously enough to where I'm actually playing good and producing good music to what my standards are, which I'm my own worst critic, so that's really where I'm at, in kind of an over-explanatory way, but all right, so keeping in the A minor. Now what it can do is we can put a change in the solo that's not in the rest of the song. I do that sometimes as well. So I'm not just soloing over A minor over and over again. So we'll start with that, and then I'll add another part into what I would do for a solo piece. So a good thing would be if you put something different in there. Don't just go to C and G, I do that sometimes, but so I could drop down to G flat minor from D. But, I'll play the rhythm part so that people don't think I'm playing out of key. I remember a guitar player years ago getting on one of my videos and saying, it sounds like you went out of key. No, I don't have a rhythm guitar or bass player here. So I was playing in the key that was the sheet music going in my head, and I was playing along to the parts, but I didn't play the bass rhythm change in there. So it sounded like I was playing in a different key, because I was. Without a second player, and I'm not using a looper, which I probably should incorporate that eventually, but I haven't used one all these years. I just don't do loopers. I probably should as a solo artist. I may experiment with that at some point. I think my system here has a looper. I haven't even used it yet, and I've had it for 3 months, but. All right, so let's try that change, incorporating that. G major to G flat minor change into the A minor solo. So we'll start it again. And then when I come up to the change, it would be. And that would probably be the end of the solo. That would be a nice. That would be a nice way to end the guitar solo, to come back in, because I could resolve in middle C major, and that would bring, because you're back in diatonic now and not in the flats or sharps. So, but I would want to play more measures of that section, call it a tail on that section, bringing you back to the main body of the song, be it a chorus, a verse, or whatever. Depends on what parts you have, in your arrangement. So right now there isn't one. So that's what I'm trying to figure out, right? So we'll do that again. I'd be soloing over that part, but when I'd first go into that section, I would play the rhythm part, because then everybody, you get that, are you playing out of key? I thought it was an A minor, so I have to play the rhythm part first, because I'm by myself, do that G major climb, hold position climb, which is just I'm resolving in C to come back to the main part of to the next section of the song, which is probably the A section. So I don't know lyrically what would work there, because I have no idea what I would put in that section yet, because it hasn't been created yet. So you don't want to rush things and put the carriage before the horse, so to speak. And that analogy absolutely applies. That absolutely applies here when you're sculpting parts out. So that's what I would do. So what I'll do is I'll do a short version of what I would do for the beginning of the guitar solo in A minor mode. So or another variation that, I don't have anything cemented. So. Something like that with some bends in there. I don't know if I would do a trill. Probably a trill with some legato in terms of technique. Now we'll do the change. Don't do the tail end of that yet, because I want to do the solo, what I would do. So I think I just solo in G flat minor and not even worry about the D major in there, because really the G flat minor in my mind stands out more than the entry chord of D major, which is basically just you could do suspended or whatever, but just D major chord. That's what I do on bass, but all right, so here we go. So a G flat minor, probably do it close to second position here, and I could try a different tone. Remember, G flat minor, so don't do the mode switching too much. You want to stick to what your format is at first, at least. Then as you get into the heart of the solo, like into the measures, then you could do some mode switching there if you want, but you want to start out with the signature mode, which in this case is G flat minor. So again, this isn't a theory lesson, but it is what you need to think about when you're writing parts. It's all related to theory, so. I did a little mode switching there. I can't help it. My instincts, There we go. So if I'm in G flat minor, that's what I would solo on, even though the beginning of the phrase is in D major, because to me the dominant. Not dominant seventh. To me, the dominant feature in that section is G flat minor. Just in my musical mind, that's what stands out to me. If it was the other way around, then I would solo in D major. Then I would solo in D major. What we got here? I don't think I'm getting enough. I'm getting more power from the processor. That's why it's a little thin sounding, and barely have the tube my amp volume up. This is an all tube orange Rock Terror 15, so this thing will melt your face, Turn that back a little. Yeah, there, that's a little better. Getting more tube and less processor. That's pretty good. Okay, that's not the song. Just back off the processor a little bit and bring the amp up a little bit. That'll warm it up because, this is an all tube setup. It should be warmer than that, not so processed sounding. That's a little better. That's better. want this about 1 o'clock at all times, and then use the rest with your amp. Otherwise, you're going to get more processor, and it's going to be way off balance. If it was solid state, I'd say don't worry about it, but. All right, so back to the piece. So to put those two sections together, how I would play it, and this is just the guitar solo section for this song skeleton piece, which has no title and all the lyrics aren't really worked out. But you have to, the way I do it, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but again, I'm not a guitar teacher, I'm not a bass teacher, I'm not a music teacher at all. I am just a rocker from the 80s who has some bass education, some music education, and 3 national awards on bass guitar. So I think what I'm saying here makes sense for me. Hopefully it makes sense for all of you out there, and everybody has their own ways of doing things. And I'm talking about the musicians watching this at some point, if not right now. That's much warmer. Much better, much better. You got to just back off the processor a little bit and bring up the tube soak a little more. You're not going to get the break up at this low of volume. A little bit, but not much. I'd have to crank this thing up way beyond the volume I'd be able to have in here to have the tube amp break up. That's all right. So let's do it. So I'm gonna oil my fretboard. Wow. I oiled it last year when I first bought this last fall, and it's already dried out. I can see, like when you look at your skin, Octane skin is getting dry. So I've got the bore oil right over there. I think after this I will, looks like the strings are starting to, I'm gonna have to change the strings too. I think I did a string change a while ago, but no, not too bad. Nah, they're okay. I've got a little more life left in these strings, so small potatoes, not a big deal. All right, that's way better now. All right, so if I can get onto it here. All right, so A minor. So going into the guitar solo section here. Actually did a little bit of key shifting there on purpose. I went to E minor pentatonic with a mode switch in there, just for a couple of notes. I'm sure you heard it on purpose because I wanted to juxtapose possibly changing from G flat minor and rotating between G flat minor and E minor just to see. That's why. But I don't know about that. That's too much. Again, this is a pop rock song. It's not prog rock, so I don't want to get too far away from my original plan, which tends to happen sometimes. So what I would do is start that again. I'm not going to go from A minor. I'll take it from the change in the guitar solo. That works a little better. I don't know if I would keep those exact notes in there, but I'm just kind of playing in some areas and doing a little experimenting with what would work and fit the vibe of the song. That's really what I'm doing here. So a little bit of mode switching, yes, but I am mainly in G flat minor mode. Well, it's not quite second position, the top of first position, but whatever. Something like that's better because now I'm staying in G flat minor. I don't know if I want to slide into it. That's probably what I would do. Or if could put it down at seventh in there since I am in G flat minor. So or sorry, minor 7. I'll just go through it. You don't have to go through it lightning fast. Try it at a slower. The note, putting in the note placement in positional playing here. I started out in positional playing, and then you can float around a little bit with mode switching, and at least this is what I do. You can do whatever you want, but I'll just try the positional playing first because it's safe. It's you're not breaking those boundaries yet. Working off that minor third again. Some barring. Remember, the bass and the rhythm guitar will be going. But while I'm soloing, remember the tail section. that works. So that's how I write all my songs. How I have forever. You have to work within the experimental mode, which, yes, of course, it's music theory based, but you don't always go by, well, theoretically it works, so I'm going to play that. Yes, that's okay. But as a songwriter, you should be looking for different areas of sound, melody, harmony that aren't just standard ways of playing, and that's how you get your different types of songs that work, even though they're like completely different sonically and different things like that. So I'm taking something completely diatonic and in G major, which is a very popular key because it works great with vocals. And I'm taking and putting my own flavor to it. In other words, my own writing style, my own playing style, and all the things that compose of me as an artist into the piece, so that it's not just that's okay to use your perfect fifths. Bar chords are very popular. I use them all the time. But you also want to use your chord stacking, use your inversions, use your first, second, and third inversion, moving the root note around. Try some different areas that represent you as an artist, and that's the technical end of it. The playing end of it is up to you to learn your scales and modes. Scale shapes, chord forms, learn, music theory. That's really what it's all about. I mean, again, it comes back to academics, even when writing a simple rock radio song. So always academics. I never will stop saying that because it is fact. Your best players in the world are academics in most cases. Now, there's some exceptions to the rule. Hendrix wasn't musically trained, wasn't a sight reader, yet he created some of the greatest music of all time. And I know that's subjective, but let's face it, folks, Hendrix was a phenomenon, and he wasn't a sight reading, jazz comping guy, or music theory, music school grad, yet he created some of the best music in history and was a rock pioneer and innovative and ahead of his time, all those things. I use that as an example. Whereas, some of the academic players, yes, they create great music, they're phenomenal players, but you've got to do something different than just run of the mill to grab the general public. That's the difference. Is the only people you're really impressing by, playing a bazillion notes is other musicians. The general public really could care less. They want melody, song, lyrics they can connect with, chords that rock if you're in the rock genre, that fit the song, and something they can sing along with. That's really what you need to be focusing on, not necessarily can I play an arpeggio in the last 10 measures of the solo. They're not going to care, So there's that reality. So E minor, rotation with C major. Why G major and E minor sound so good together? Relative minor, relative major going in the opposite direction, relative major, relative minor. That's why they sound so good together. So now what I would do is work on a bridge section. So now I don't have all the parts worked out, but you can see the basic structure of the sections that I've created here. So Creation Cave series. So hello, we're creating here today. You know, we're not doing doing Eddie Van Halen wannabe stuff, you know. As much as I love Eddie Van Halen. Much as I love that music, you know, commercial hard rock and all that kind of stuff from that era, you know, and forward. That's not my goal as a songwriter, to just become somebody else and to regurgitate classic standards, because I'm not a professional guitar player. I'm a professional bass player. I'm a songwriter on guitar, so I use this for my writing tool, you know. However, I have the skills to be able to do that and do it as good as anybody else out there, if not better. If I just focused on that and just played guitar all the time, that's all I did, and put everything else away and just focus on this and my songwriting and my guitar, yes, I would be a competitive force out there anywhere. I've been told that thousands of times in my inboxes for my music page and YouTube and all that stuff. Yeah, I understand that, but I'm a bass player. You know what I mean? It's like, and I enjoy being a bass player. It's enough for me, you know. All right, so back to the topic. So in going through I'll do a short condensed version phrasing wise, just to show you what I've got so far, which you should already know if you've been following along, but here we go. Now, I think as an intro, I would do, I would not do a minor 7 because it's G major. I would probably just, I would do some kind of pulsation thing with like, four times around like that, and then verses and choruses will be in there. So on the E minor, we'll pedal to A minor, which will bring in the guitar solo sections. should be a rest there. 2, 3, 4, whole note rest. 2, 3, 4. Breakdown section, so whole rest into a breakdown, decrescendo dynamics, real quiet, subtle. Even with no drums, even just cymbal accents or something. That's as much as I have on that built. So what do we have here? A breakdown. And the lyrics were just ad lib. You know, I have no idea what I would use. That some of those lyrics would probably be repeated and put into the verses and choruses, but I don't have everything complete, every word, every accent, every melody, pitch, all those things, you know, because I have to experiment with that just like I do with the guitar, you know. So that's really, in essence, of the creative process that I've always used and what works, and it works out live professionally. I remember playing a few of my originals in the past, but you know, again, it gets into I don't want to get into the demographics and marketing stuff and what you have to play to get paid and all that stuff. Any professional musician out there knows that. But, you know, it doesn't matter when I'm playing here. If I'm in performance mode, it's as if I would be playing it out live in front of people, which I know I've said 1,000 times, but that's the truth. You know, I play it as if I would be performing it out live when it's performance. This stuff, no, this is, of course not, you know, but, that's really about it, folks. I mean, that's the creative process. I mean, I didn't complete the song, but we have intro, with the tonic of G major, and then solo section broken up into two different sections with two different keys, different parts, being A minor, G flat minor, with a D on the turnaround. I guess you would call that a turnaround, kind of. That's the entry chord into the section where you're in D major. So you're pedaling off the D major to get the G flat minor. That's a better description. And then we come back out of the guitar solo with the inclining G major scale open position, which is a counterpoint of sorts, where I'm climbing with the bass line and using the open position notes to kind of chime with it and follow it. And so then we have that section that's comes up. I'm going to put a rest in there where there's nothing, and then a breakdown section to bring it back in easy. So it's not just chunka, same dynamics all the way through the song. You need to do peaks and valleys. That's another thing. In arrangements, that's in arrangements. You need to do peaks and valleys and stuff like that, to give yourself a song that's, or create a song that has dynamics. That's a huge deal too. I didn't mention much of that, but that's pretty important. And it gives the song different colors, so to speak, and peaks and valleys dynamically. And that's what composes a great song. So, you know, that's about it for today on Creation Cave 2026. I'll do some more of these around my regular soundstage and sit-down session performances and my live performances out with other performers in the region. I do have more shows coming up, which I will announce to all of you, and you will probably see the footage as I've reposted stuff from last year's performances and all the shows I did last year, multiple shows, and I have plans to be doing more this year. So keep it going, folks, right? Thanks for joining me. I am August Siri. Until the next one, be safe. And love you all, man, for following my work. We'll catch you all later.